You have reached Deception Detection Radio with Kay from the Deception Detection Network. Please stay on the line while I connect you with the truth. Hi everyone, welcome to Deception Detection Radio. I'm Kay. I pray you all had a blessed week. Tonight, returning guest Stan Deyo will be taking us on an exciting quest to find the Garden of Eden and update us on current events taking place in the Middle East. Stan has one of the most diverse backgrounds of anyone I've ever spoken with. Stan has held above top secret security clearance and worked undercover for the FBI. He was part of an exclusive black project headed by Dr. Edward Teller, specializing in the development of flying saucer technology. He is a computer programmer of mainframes in 7 languages, a senior systems analyst, a research physicist, a marine architect. Also, he is an advanced propulsion engineer for marine, air, and spacecraft. He has authored 3 books and 6 scientific papers. He's a partner in Deyo Enterprises, LLC. He's also an amateur archaeologist in the Middle East. Stan has even explored the real Indiana Jones caves in the Qumran region of Israel. He has been a TV documentary television host for several shows on Tesla, a university lecturer in 3D computer animation and graphic art, a Bible student, and a public lecturer on world events. I first started listening to Stan on the Hagman and Hagman Report quite some time ago, and he still is a guest on this show, normally on Tuesday evenings. I would like to welcome back my brother in Christ, Stan Deyo. Welcome, Stan. Thank you for coming back on with me. How are you tonight?
Thank you, Kay. I'm doing quite well. It's the end of the day for us here when we're recording this, and it's been a busy day, but I feel really good having gotten everything done.
That's wonderful. I mean, it seems like you're always busy. I never hear of you taking a break, you or Holly.
Well, Holly's been working on a new book about the end time prophetic events, and who's doing it and documents. She's got like over 1,200 footnotes at the moment in it, but it's a year and a half's worth of work, and every waking moment when she's not doing some of the cooking or washing clothes or something, she's down here writing, and she gets up at 4:30 about 4 hours before I even open an eyelid and starts working. So she is really more working harder than me. It's just a real hard task because it all has to be documented and the I's dotted and T's crossed. It's such a specific book about who's doing what and what it means to us, that kind of stuff.
That sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, tonight we're going to go on the quest for the Garden of Eden and discuss the Middle East updates. But what I'd like to do is go ahead and do the opening prayer, and then we'll get started on our adventure. How's that sound?
Sound like a plan. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Dear Heavenly Father, once again, I thank you for your blessings and for bringing us all together. Thank you for looking after everyone during this last week. And I thank you for just everything that you do, Lord. Please open the ears of the people so that they hear your words, Lord. Put your words in our mouths. Make your words our words. Soften everyone's heart, Lord, so that your word may be etched upon them. Please look over all the equipment that we're using so that we have nothing that can interfere with it. Place a hedge of protection around all the listeners, around Stan, around myself, so that everything may just flow easily, Father, and so that that the dark side doesn't try to mess with us. I ask you this, dear Father, in Jesus' holy and mighty name. Amen.
Amen. Well, now,
where would you like to start, Stan? Would you like to do the Garden of Eden or the Middle East updates first?
Well, let's do the Garden of Eden. We did mention that in the last show, and that'd be a good place to start just for continuity. Let me start out by saying this. There are several reasons that I think that finding the real Garden of Eden was important. If it existed, right? Or if it exists now. And the first reason would be to prove that the Eden account in the Bible is absolutely correct down to the smallest detail. That's kind of proving the inerrant version of the Bible there. although I know there are some translation errors in many of the books, from the ages past, but the main thing is to show that we can actually use it to prove that there was a Garden of Eden.
Mm-hmm.
And scientifically, finding the Garden of Eden will help us to correct the concept going around the geophysics circle of continental drift, where they say that continents are drifting in various directions over the oceans at several inches per year, and they are doing that now. But in the formation of when the Great Flood happened, there was a great meteor impact that caused the continents are all gathered together into one landmass called Pangea. It split them apart, and they rapidly moved apart and gradually slowed down after that initial thump from that meteor that hit in the Gulf of Mexico, and to where they're only drifting a few inches per year now. But they think it's been this way all the time that we've been measuring it, so therefore it must have been that way 10,000 years ago or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and I'm going to be able to explain, by having found the Garden of Eden the way I did, why dinosaurs were able to support their own weight, which has been a big question with anthropologists saying, well, how could these big beasts with these bones of this size actually support the weight? And they've recently found that, well, the dinosaur bones are like filled with a honeycomb kind of thing, and the ligaments and stuff help to distribute the weight, so they could have existed and walked around and done everything they did in even greater gravity. Now, when I first gave the lecture on this in 2014 about where the Garden of Eden was and how I found it, I thought at that time, well, that gravity was less back at the time of the Garden of Eden. However, I've since reversed that position on some physics I've been doing, but it doesn't really hurt the thing one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
A side issue of all this is finding the 3 locations where King Solomon's gold mines were. That's not a high reason to look for Garden of Eden, but it was part of the clues that I used to find a Garden of Eden, like where various countries were, Havilah and stuff like that. And it's just incredible things when I explain these things. The author of the Eden account is a little bit up in the air because, guys that spend more time analyzing the original languages of Genesis than I do say that there are 2 creation accounts in the beginning of Genesis, and some other things in there indicate that there were 2 authors to the book of Genesis, and that Moses redacted them. So anyway, this helps us pin down a little bit the author of the Eden account, and it also lets us know more about where the races of people settled after the flood, because you can see when all the continents are back together, there's 3 bands which Noah gave to his sons, and those bands have people of darker skin in the southern band, and medium brown skin and yellow in the middle band, and in the top band, the northern band, you have some of the white and yellow races mixed. But it shows that they were given those territories by Noah, and that's where we see them distributed today. People that have studied map making or a little bit of geography and stuff realize that the Earth is not straight perpendicular as it spins around the sun. The Earth's spinning is tilted by 23.5 degrees off the upright. That's why we have seasons, because of that slant. The reason for that is still up for debate, but George Dodwell, who was an Australian government astronomer about 50 years ago, did a research paper on this for the government, and one of my friends, Barry Setterfield, who used to live down there very close to Dr. Dodwell, was asked by the government to complete his work after he died. Now, in doing so, they were able to determine that the tilt in the Earth, you can trace it backwards like a spinning top when it was upright to where it is now, and see the precession of it. And they found out that the date of that, when it was struck by something, they think like the Chicxulub meteor, it was 2345 BC. And of course, now I'm saying that that did create the flood. That's another piece of information that's helping us to understand these timelines. When the normal geologists and archaeologists try to date things, the geologist will dig something out of a layer, and they will say, oh, that's in this layer, which the archaeologists call the such and such period, therefore this layer of stone or whatever they're looking at, it must be the age that the archaeologists say. And the archaeologists, many of them have said, now, as the geologists say, this layer does this, and they're depending on each other back and forth, and still it's blind leading the blind. There's no accurate way at this point for them to use radiocarbon 14 dating to say this bone is 4,000 years old or that one's 100,000 years old or whatever. And here's the reason: radiocarbon 14 dating depends on atoms decaying and emitting light photons, which are electromagnetic waves in the fluid of space. Now, what would happen if the decay of these atomic materials that they're using to determine the age of a sample, what would happen if the decay rate of the radioactive material was much faster, like 10 with 30 zeros strung out behind it faster? Impossible? No. The new discussions on the origin of the Big Bang say that in the beginning, that the speed of light must have been about 10 with 30 zeros times behind it times faster than it is now. And as space expanded and the density of space got less, I know this is tech speak, but bear with me. As the density of space got less, the speed of light and all other electromagnetic radiation slowed down. And it's been slowing down very slowly now, like the continental drift is in inches. Well, this is in, you know, hundreds of feet,
Mm-hmm.
per second, that kind of stuff. But we have a graph from the late 1800s of plotted speeds of light, and even with era for the way they were doing it, it shows an exponential curve.
Can I
With
ask
that
you a
in mind,
question, Stan? I'm
sure.
sorry. So you're saying that if something was found and they said that it was from the, say, the Mesozoic period, that according to all these different variations around in the atmosphere, then that would dictate to what the carbon 14 dating would show, and it would be inaccurate if external elements affected that.
Yeah, I'm trying to, I'm just being sure what you said I understand correct. Yeah, I think what you said is correct. Some of your listeners may get the tech speak. I didn't want to bore them with that. The whole lecture's not going to be like that. But it basically means that when we look in history using carbon 14 dating and argon dating and those kind of things, and we say that the continents all used to be together in one place called Pangea, and they started to break apart 100 million years ago. And when we apply this new speed of light problem to the aging of the carbon 14, various other things, we find out that the split up of Pangea was not 100 million years ago, it was about 4,300 years ago. And that's a big difference between 100 million years,
Yes.
you see. And this brings us closer to a younger Earth. Now, it doesn't mean we're 6,000 years old, but the Garden of Eden complex, and after that, okay, definitely that can be in that 6,000 year range. But before that, the Earth had to cool down. A few other things had to happen. So somewhere between 6,000 and, I don't know, 50,000 years or whatever, the Earth formed, and the sun and the solar system formed and been cooling down since then. But anyway, that's another discussion. The main thing I'm trying to say is that looking for the Garden of Eden, when I did find it, I had to shrink the Earth back down to where it was before it tilted, and it's about 25% smaller in diameter. And then I had to move all the continents back together to see where the rivers are,
Mm.
because these big rivers, they weren't little rivers. These big rivers that came out of Eden, those four big rivers, they cut grooves into the dirt of Pangea where all the continents were together. And when the continental split came because of the meteor impact over in the Chicxulub impact zone in the Gulf of Mexico, it split where the ground was weakest. That's where these big rivers had carved holes in the dirt. And then we had these four big rivers. Now, back in 1989, I wrote and published the Vindicator Scrolls, thinking I had been able to track back like that using library maps and things. I didn't have the same resources I've got now. But anyway, I think I had traced all those rivers back to one point, which was in the Danakil Plains of Ethiopia, and that's near the Gulf of Aden, or Eden in the local language,
Mm-hmm.
at the entrance to the Red Sea from the Arabic Sea. Anyway, I had done it, put the book away, filed it, and years went past. When I came back looking at this, the first thing I did was go back to talk about looking at Eden and the rivers with new data I got from Google Earth Pro and from the Scripps Institution over in California. Stuff that hadn't even been made public yet, they were letting me have in databases to look at. And when I did that, I was able to fly around, digitally fly around Ethiopia and Eritrea and all around those areas there to try to find out where the garden part, the hedged in part, would have been for Adam and Eve. And I couldn't find anything that really dug my chime. And I thought, well, where does the water come that supplies all these rivers coming out of this area here in the Afar Triangle where I was? And I traced it back up a hill and then up a huge mountainous rift. It's the Great East African Rift. And I went up, 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 following that big river that had split. And I went up, 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 and up into northern Tanzania. And I
Oh,
thought, okay, where did this river start? And I traced it back, and it started uh, out of a big volcano at the top of the rim. I thought, well, now that's odd. Uh, Not only is this river here, but it's a river that splits right there inside this crater at the top, and it splits into four other rivers. And I thought, well, okay, I've been tracing two or three of them up as one into here. Maybe it could be. I thought, well, this is a volcano out in the middle of nowhere in Tanzania. What do people say about it on the maps and on the internet? I found the name of it, and it's called the Ngoro Crater and the Ngoro Conservancy. And I thought, okay, and I started reading, and I found ads posted by tourist agencies and safaris saying, "Visit Africa's last Garden of Eden." And I
oh,
thought,
wow.
what? And apparently, without knowing what I was doing, what they had been doing was looking all over Africa for tourist places. Mainly the rich and famous that could afford safaris and stuff. But uh, even John Wayne filmed Hatari in the Ngoro crater. So I looked at that, and they've been saying that was the only place in Africa that was still this lush thing with 25,000 large beasts, like animals like hippos and elephants and that kind of stuff, still living there, and all kinds of birds and things. And uh, I thought, well, okay, that's really a surprise. They call that Eden, and I think it might be. So after that, it took me a while to start tracing the rivers, and I thought, well, let's just start with Genesis 2:8. And it said, "And God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man who he had formed." Now, people tend to forget this, but there was a land to the west of the Garden of Eden called the land of Eden. And what God was doing, or why he called that whole area Eden, I don't know. But the Garden of Eden was on the eastern side, which is exactly where this Ngorongoro crater is. I mean, we're up at an altitude between 7,500 feet and 9,500 feet for the high part of it. And this is on the high ground there. And it's the only collapsed volcanic dome that is not broken around the rim of it. It's still intact and still can hold animals in there, and keep them from wandering if you want to. It's like a big hedged in area, which is what the Hebrew says. Gan means a hedged in area to put your livestock or whatever you're putting in the garden. Now, okay, now westward of this crater, there's a lush savanna full of all kinds of animals like are in the let's call it the garden crater. But there are other animals as well, large herds and wildebeest and all kinds of them, all through this big plain with a huge big lake called Lake Victoria these days. I mean, it was much bigger than the Garden of Eden. We're talking thousands of square miles. And the Garden of Eden, by the way, is only 100 square miles, but still, that's a pretty big garden to live in.
Mm-hmm.
We're not talking square feet for a house. We're talking square miles.
Big difference.
Anyway, so westward of the crater for Eden is this great savanna, and it's called the Serengeti Plain. And it is also today, as is the Garden Crater, a conservancy of the United Nations Scientific Organization, UNESCO, and they're preserving it as a World Heritage without knowing, at least not publicly anyway, that it's the real Garden of Eden. So you can see all the pointers I'm finding there. I was very excited about
Mm-hmm.
that Garden Crater in the east of Eden. And also later in, I don't know whether I have it here in my notes. I think I had it in the lecture, but Uh, East of this crater, which is the Garden of Eden, is um, a large thing with fiery, sparkly light spinning out of the top of it that lights the pathway that leads to the Garden of Eden. And it's Mount Kilimanjaro. When you go through all the translations, it's Mount Kilimanjaro, and it is east, just like it said, east of the Garden Crater. So it fits exactly what the scripture was saying. Now, in Genesis 2:10, it says a river went out of Eden, but in the Hebrew it says, and a river went up out of Eden to water the garden, and from there it was parted and it became four head waters for four large rivers. Now, the reason that's important is at the top edge of the crater on the north side of the Eden crater, I found a huge, kind of not doing too much anymore, but water spring that put out like millions of gallons of water per minute. It was just a huge thing. And it had come from underground, possibly from Lake Victoria, pressuring it down into the hot rocks below the volcanic area, which, is still warm and pushes stuff out today. But it would have shoved this hot water straight up through that fountain on the top, and it split into four rivers. And I was able to find this water source that had come up out of Eden, which is to the west of the crater, to water the garden. And part of it flowed down into the garden, and the rest went out into those four rivers. Now, how do you find these? The easiest one for me to start with was to find the second river called the Gihon. And they say in the King James Version, in English, they say the Gihon is a river that goes around the whole land of Ethiopia. Now, in the Hebrew, it doesn't say that. It's the same one that goes all around the land of Cush with a K. And I thought, well, now everybody thinks that Ethiopia and Eritrea were part of the Nubian Empire and was probably the Cushites with a C.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, let's just look and see in that region of the Middle East, is there any other country that has any rivers or towns that sound like Cush? And I was able to find around Iran and part of Pakistan over 100 and some odd names of Kish, Kash, Kishan, Kush with a K all through there. And it almost drew a map around a riverbed around Iran. So that was how I found, that first or the second river. And the first one was harder. It was called the Pishon. And they say it went around the land of Havilah, where there's a lot of gold.
Mm-hmm.
And it's other, like precious gums and onyx and stuff like that. Now, this was written back, we think, somewhere around the time of the Exodus being maybe 13 or 1400 BC. And this is before King Solomon. So if this was written down at that time, then it was by people who knew and gave the information that Moses used, or God told him directly, I'm not sure, but that this land was known for gold. So if it was known for gold, the people around that Middle East had to know this country was known for its gold. And so then I started tracking for where gold was found. And there weren't a lot of, in fact, there weren't any places in Saudi Arabia, Israel, and stuff like that, because even King Solomon had to go to three other places way out of the country to find gold. So then I thought, well, I'll look and see where he found gold. And it took a while translating to find his three sites for gold. And one of them was in what is now Madagascar, which was at the time everything was all together in one landmass. Madagascar was part of Tanzania, southern Tanzania. And so I thought, okay, well, if this river comes down here, and I traced it out of the top of the crater, sure enough, it came right around and encircled Madagascar. And the gold there, it has been and still is so plentiful. It's leached out of granite mountains there and down into many riverbeds as sand and fine gold mixed. And young kids in the area have been used, probably slave labor, but anyway, cheap labor, for centuries, particularly by the French, and now the Chinese and everybody else will get involved, where they just would pan the gold out of the river sand. It was just so plentiful. It was very high grade gold. So that's Havilah, and that's Pishon. And the third river is called the Hiddekel, and I agree, it's the Tigris. And it says it's riverbed ran east of Assyria, which was centered around the town of Asher. Now, that river went up through western Iran and fell back down. It was in the mountains. It fell back down into the lower regions of Asher, where it went down into the Persian Gulf. And so we found that river. And the fourth river is the river Euphrates. In Hebrew, it's called Firat. And in one place, not in Genesis, another place in the Old Testament, um, in assigning borders for Abraham, it says, and as far as the river Ephrat, and it repeats it, river Ephrat. And so I went to, scholars, Jewish scholars. I said, why is this river repeated here when it wasn't in the Genesis account? They said, when this account was written for the territorial given to Israel to give to Abraham and his descendants, it says this meant the rivers Euphrates. And I said, the rivers? So I realized that the fourth river by that time had been broken apart and it was no longer one continuous river. So I had to look for pieces of the Euphrates, the Firat, which I did do. And again, taking a lot of information together, I was able to, as I put the earth back together, look at the riverbeds, and the riverbeds, one of them for the Euphrates, could have either been the Red Sea, heading from out of Tanzania, fell down out of there through the riverbed of the Red Sea, or through the riverbed of the Nile. They're both close and parallel, and it would have run down to the Nile Delta and turned right and kind of slightly north to go along the coast of the what's called the Levant, Israel, and Syria and those kind of countries on the coast there. And this river ran along there, but when the earth split apart, it became the Mediterranean Sea. But before that, it was all connected all the way back to Tanzania, and it flowed around the coast of Israel and um, the
Wow.
Syrians and up into the mountains and fell down into the Persian Gulf. So that's why we have the Euphrates tail end as being thought to be the only Euphrates running parallel to the Tigris in that same area. But when you put it all back together again, they both came from the same source in Tanzania. Um, and in the DVD I made of the lecture, I have graphic pictures to explain all this so you can see
Mm-hmm.
how I figured this out. And it wasn't done overnight, believe me.
It sounds like it took a lot of diligence
Yes.
just to. I can't imagine that having to trace back like that to be able. That's almost like putting a piece, a puzzle together and having all the pieces, but some of the pieces aren't the right shape. Something's out of whack, and you had to trace it back.
Yeah. Yeah. India, where actually the Gihon could have gone around India as well as part of Iran, but India was the hardest one because it was knocked out of its position. It used to be connected to the eastern coast of Africa, as was Madagascar, and Madagascar touched India about midway down. But when that impact split the continent apart there, it shoved India to, let's see, to where it was three times as far away as it was when it was on the coast of Africa. It shoved it so hard that it formed the Himalayan mountains between India and China, which made it a bit difficult to follow a riverbed there. But, you know, I did find one. And then to go into the ocean depths and use the maps there that were supplied to me by Scripps Institute to see where India used to be and where Africa connected to it. And in the process of doing all that, I found out, okay, I told you about the rich gold in Madagascar, but if
Yes.
you went right, or it's like if you drew an equatorial line through Madagascar and over to where it used to touch India, there are huge gold mines there in India, which used to be connected to Madagascar. You see, it was just all that was all connected on a line that's probably about 60 degrees south latitude. I'm just kind of guessing at it, but the gold did go from there, and it did go into Tanzania as well. So all that was a gold field, and got split into three pieces when the Pangean continent was broken by that meteor impact.
That's a huge amount of territory.
Yeah, it is. And um, based on that, you can also look at other things. I've been doing this after the lecture. It was South America and Africa used to touch. And they've just recently discovered a 4,000 mile long dead riverbed in the sand of the northern Sahara, saying, we don't know where it came from, but it used to be a really big river. And when you touch that over to the coast of South America, you find that that area touches the coastline where the great river of South America, oh, what do you call it? Huge river. Anyway, it starts on the west coast of South America, flows down over to the sea there, and it would have been the major tributary to that mystery river they found in North Africa in the last few months. But the continents all have to be together for that to work. And of course, they haven't adopted that officially yet in geology and archaeology, so it's hard for them to figure out what to say about it. I told you about the races, the Noahic, it's Noahic migrations after the flood. There's another book, the book that Noah gave his blessings and territorial inheritances to his sons, and in that is where you see where the races from the three sons settled, Japheth, Shem, and Ham. And you can see where Ham went all through Africa and into to Australia as well. Possibly New Zealand, but we think those were migrations from Hawaii later. That was the southern band of inheritances from Noah. And India, Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq, Jordan, Syria. I'm looking at a small map. All these were part of Shem, the Shemites. And when this is all connected together into one continent, this area, we saw that the Shemites migrated into Europe and eventually, by boat later into Americas. This is why some of these things that occur, uh, occur in the historical references, why some of them think that they could not have migrated from, say, Europe over to the United States the way they did. But when you put everything all back together again, the biologists have put together a gene map showing the DNA migration patterns out of it's about 100 miles from where the Garden of Eden is, and they've been able to trace what they call the mitochondrial Eve, her gene in various groups of people they studied all over the world, and they form a tree that branches out of of Tanzania there, and it goes up and into the Middle East, into, say, Iran, Syria, that region, Iraq, and splits to the left into Europe, and splits to the right into China, Asia. And when you put all the continents that we have now back together in the old form, you can see how those arrows continued. And that's why the migration pattern that seemed impossible really is possible, because the land was all connected and you didn't have to make a sea voyage to get to it. These things are going to solve a lot of mysteries in archaeology.
That makes so much sense. As you said, to be able to trek from one country to the other, I mean, there weren't an individualized continents.
That's right.
So
That's right.
the time would be cut down and there wouldn't be the problem of a boat sailing. They could just walk or ride whatever they had.
Yeah. Even if the continents were split at the time of the migrations, they wouldn't have been split very far.
Hmm.
There was just a short hop across a pond almost. And Noah, in some of his descriptions of the property that he's giving to his sons, does mention the gorge where this river flows, and this one is east of Eden, and helps us to track these things down. Another mystery that this helped us to solve. You've heard of the Yucatan Peninsula, haven't you?
Yes.
Okay, that's down on the southern part of the Gulf of Mexico. Nice holiday place, coastal villages, whatever. But the inhabitants for generations don't know why they call it the Yucatan Peninsula, but it came to them through history. When you put all the continents together, that peninsula touches the west coast of Africa at the Big Bulge. And there was where part of the sons of Noah, or descendants of Noah, settled. And the guy who settled in that area was named in the Bible Joktan, Joktan. In Hebrew, you say that Yakitan, Yucatan, Yakitan, and that explains the mystery of where the Aztecs came from in that area.
How do you keep from rabbit trailing when you're doing your research? Because I know that as you're going, I mean, I know just from different things that I look into, not at the depth that you do, that it's very easy to find other things that pop up that I want to check out. How do you do that?
Well, I make a little note to go back to that rabbit trail and follow this one for a while. And, it's I'm sure I miss things. I forget to go down a number of trails, but as you say, it's pretty challenging to stop and consolidate the rabbit trails you're in, and then go after the others that have opened up. A lot of people say, you know, that the Garden of Eden story there in Genesis, that it couldn't be where I said it was because there's no flaming cherub, guarding it, to keep people out of it. But that's not the way it really was explaining it. The Hebrew that Moses wrote in the form of the story of the Garden of Eden, the Hebrew was Old Hebrew, Paleo Hebrew, and in that the word they used, cherub, for cherub, did not mean a little fat-cheeked baby thing with angel wings and a harp at all. Never has meant that, but it meant a large, destructive, huge thing.
Yes.
And they used to call volcanoes that, burning mountains. And the one I was telling you about before, uh, Kilimanjaro, has 3 peaks on it, and it in the local language it's called the mountain of light. And when it was active, I am sure it was spewing out, sparkling, as the Hebrew word for the sword is also meaning sparkling, spinning vortex of fire, and that would have been coming out of that volcano. And it it guarded, but it actually guided the way. If you read the Hebrew, it guided the way to the Garden of Eden. If you came in from the coast, um, and the east coast at the end of Tanzania, and you went west, if you got to this burning volcanic mountain, you know, uh, and looked west of there, followed that path through a valley, which you can see on the things I've got on the DVD, you would arrive at the Garden of Eden up in that raised plateau, and the 4 rivers as well, where they came from, up at that huge water area. That water that came out of there, it was like, oh, huge, huge amounts of water, bigger than the Mississippi River flow, than any of the other rivers we've got in South America, all put together. That's how much water was gushing up out of this thing. It chewed holes in a 10,000 foot high crater bed and flowed down into the rest of the world.
Oh
And
my.
that's why it probably was not really damaged much at all by the flood. Um, in the Middle East, sorry, in Europe in the Middle Ages, the clerics who studied the Bible then said the Garden of Eden. They told this to Columbus, by the way, when he was going over to the Americas. Look for the Garden of Eden because it will be a high area and a ridged-in area, which was able to survive the flood. And that's just nobody really thought much about it. And Columbus thought he might have discovered the Garden of Eden in Venezuela and some high mountains there and stuff. But I, I guess I could say this kind of reinforces what those clerics were writing about for whatever reason they decided. And that to me meant that not every mountain was flooded. Because if it didn't get destroyed by the flood, according to the clerics researching the ancient papers, and these were Catholic clerics, by the way, who had access to all kinds of papers and scrolls that are either now gone or locked up somewhere and not, organized yet or released after Napoleon took all the records out of the Vatican, and then the Vatican took them back a few years later after he was gone. Things got burned and destroyed and used to wrap fish and French fries and stuff in France. So
Ugh.
a lot of the documentation is just gone. It'll never be available. So I am, as I say, mildly curious. One of the rabbit holes that forms out of this is that if they think that the Garden of Eden was on a high place like this and was not destroyed by the flood because it was so high, then there were other mountains that would have survived as well. And so the flood would have killed people that were crossbred between the fallen angels and humans in that area, but others could have survived. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I mean, Cain had to marry someone over in the land of Nod, east of Eden. It wasn't his sister. There's just a lot of little things like this that are starting to, by their absence, make us think, okay, here's where the border of the flood was, or here's where Cain settled. And this is a rabbit hole here too, but we'll dodge into it. Cain and Abel were born outside the Garden of Eden. When Cain killed Abel, Cain was marked, the blood mark on him, to say, don't kill this man, he's a murderer. And so he went east of Eden. Well, east of Eden would be straight into the ocean at the moment, unless you bring India back around, which it was when it was all connected. And where he would have gone directly east of the Garden of Eden, or just north of there, a few miles where they were living, east of there is the opening to the Indus River Valley. And you think, well, okay, fine, Indus River Valley. They've discovered some time ago that there are two, maybe three ancient cities buried in the mud that they've been excavating. Um, Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, and another one with a C, I forget, but I think that's the one that Cain's son Enoch built. But the Indus River Valley is from a Hebrew word. Indus is a future tense plural for men of the verb nod, and the verb
Ah,
nod means to wander as fugitives. The land of Nod is the Indus River Valley where the men wandered as fugitives because they were marked. And why do the people of India wear that little red dot, in one of the religions on their forehead? They don't
yes,
know. They don't know. It just came from antiquity. We don't know why we wear it. Now, isn't that weird?
it is. I mean, I'd heard that it was a possibility that that represented the third eye, but it makes more sense to think that it was a mark that could have came from the time of Cain.
But now here's the problem with that. If the flood killed everybody, why would anybody from Noah's descendants go settle in the Indus River Valley and put the red mark on and call themselves the descendants of Cain,
Okay,
unless
good point.
some did survive? You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Now we know that there was an intrusion in Israel at Mount Hermon, north of Israel, up near the northern part of Syria, where the angels that were cast down descended there and started mating with human women. Even the Greek legends put that area from Israel up into um, the mountains of northern Syria and over to the coast. They put that area as where the gods mated with human women, and where Hercules was born. And to that end, they built 10 cities, the Greeks did, in that whole area from northern Israel up there. They built 10 cities called the Decapolis cities. They were religious cities with statues to gods and whatever. But they, the Greeks, settled that area saying this is where it all happened, where the gods came down and mated with our women. What I found is when you follow the Jordan River right up to where that Mount Hermon is, um, on either side, the east and west side of that river there are these huge mountainous structures, two mountains that come up, and that's what they call the Pillars of Hercules, not the ones at the Mediterranean going into the Atlantic Ocean at Gibraltar. No, the Greeks were down here, and those two mountains, the Lebanon and Anti-Lebanon mountains, were the gates, the huge uh, the pillars of Heracles. And with the Greeks having settled in that area, you can just darn near bet that's where the pillars of Hercules were, which is important if you're looking for Atlantis and things like that. But that's
Mm-hmm.
another story. That's two or three more rabbit holes away.
We'll get to those eventually.
Yeah,
Maybe not
yeah,
tonight, but another night.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I never looked at it like that. When I mean, it's going back a little bit, but when you'd mentioned about Kilimanjaro, my first thought of that was that it was the guards of the Garden of Eden. So when you said that, that put all that into place for me. And now everything else is also lining up.
It's a wonderful place. I've flown over it, in pictures and photographs and digitally. I'm really like a digital archaeologist now. It's a lot quicker and a lot less interaction with the natives that tend to hurt explorers these days.
Yes, I'm sure they like to know what you're looking at and they want to help and they end up
Uh,
hindering.
yeah, some of them do. Some of them do. Some of them are, terrorists these days. It makes exploration in the Middle East a little bit more risky. But yeah, I'm just looking here. I've got on my website, which I've sent you a link to. There's a guy that will take people on safari, short safaris, long safaris, whatever, and you can stay in a hotel for some of them. And he's been corresponding with me since late 2014 when I discovered the Garden of Eden, saying, "Look, I'm a Christian fella, and my wife and I have a tour agency here in Tanzania, and we'd be tickled to death to show people, the Garden of Eden and in the land of Eden, the Serengeti west of that." And they call their company Elyon Tours of Tanzania. Now, there's a link to it on my website, which you can share with your listeners.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Elyon is Hebrew. El Elyon, it's two words. El Elyon is the Most High God in ancient Hebrew. Elyon just means the highest. Now, the highest tours of the elevated regions of Tanzania is what he's called this Elyon Tours, the highest tours of Tanzania. And he's reasonably young man, his wife, and nice guy. A picture of him and his wife is there on the website. And some of the things you can do: some ballooning over the Serengeti, looking at Kilimanjaro by air, you know, uh, flamingos in the Brine Lake inside the Ngoro crater. That's another interesting thing that they were telling me. Those flamingos, this is the only kind of place where they can grow red like that naturally, because they eat this brine, salty water there in the Garden of Eden. And instead of being white, instead of being dead from the poison of this salty water, it turns their feathers red and part of their body, the legs red. And that's where they get the red color from. But it's only the uh, the storks or flamingos that are in areas like this in the Ngoro crater that are going to be
Absolutely
colorful.
beautiful. All
Yeah,
the photos from there are beautiful, and I will supply the links so you listeners will be able to see this. It's breathtaking.
it is, isn't it? Yeah. And there are more on the main site. If you let's see, um, it's on the main site down underneath. There's a few boxes of text in red and white, and then you see the Elion Tours image, and then to the left of that you see click images to see lectures or photographs from Stan's lecture, and in there are some more pictures of what we shot from the digital flyover. But in the DVD, you actually get to see these areas um, in the trailer, the actual photographs. There's a Ngoro crater looking southeast in the middle of this page I'm referring you to, where you can see cloud banks hanging over the rim. But
Mm.
it just fits so perfectly that there just can be no doubt in my mind that we were looking at, and we are looking at this moment at the Garden of Eden, the original. And the fact that they call it Africa's last Garden of Eden in the tour agency stuff tells you that they think it's a special place, even without knowing that we can prove it is the place.
I was just going to ask you if the people there actually realize what they have.
You know, they do. They do, but it's not the tour agencies. It's a northern tribe that to the north of the Garden of Eden. They used to live in and well, around the Garden of Eden complex there at the base of it. And they lived there for over 14 or 1500 years. And from their ancient ancestors, they learned uh, the secret of the Ngoro crater, the Garden of Eden. They said that in that big crater was where God came down from heaven, made man, put him out into the land, and then went back up into the heaven. And that's pretty much a short story, but they are the only tribe around I found that had tribal legends that said that, and they have since moved north of there, from away from the garden because of political and warfare issues with you know Maasai and various other tribes that were moving into the territory.
Hmm.
But anyway, that legend did say that. So yes, some of the tribes do recognize that's where man started.
Is the area, because from the pictures it looks virtually untouched by man. Is it still that way?
Yes, as I say, the UNESCO and the Tanzanian government have definitely marked it off limits for poachers, for settlements, or anything. There is one farmhouse that a German built there some time back, last century, century before maybe, and that's I think been used in the Hatari movie by John Wayne and his friends. But other than that, no one's allowed to get down in there. You can be up on the rim, and there's some very nice hotels and camping grounds and stuff on the rims that you can look down, but you can't go down into it unless you're taken by a tour guide. The Maasai, who mainly live to the west of the garden in the Serengeti Plain, are allowed to bring their cattle up a trail and over the rim and adjust them there during the day, and then but they have to take them home at night. They can't stay there overnight. So yes, it is a protected area, and there's one house that's that was there when the Germans during World War II owned the property,
Mm-hmm.
and but other than that, there's no building allowed except for the tourist areas up on the rim, and they're limiting that because of the danger to the environment, because you have to have septics and various other things that are in the area. And with all the traffic, when I say all the traffic, every year about 250,000 people come to visit the Garden of Eden. So there's a bit of traffic on the roads and the trails, and just some refuse and stuff gets left behind. They have to find and pick up. So it's the Tanzanian government's kind of saying, look, let's just slow this down. You you're trampling over the heritage. So you know, I think with the modern digital age, a lot of stuff can be done that pictures and movies and videos that people take, that we can share their experience of actually getting out there and fighting the tsetse flies and whatever else you would do in Africa.
That's true.
Prince Charles and his son, I think William, have been to it. The Prime Minister of Japan went a couple of years ago. The Clintons have been twice. I mean, the rich and famous go there. Of course, the rooms they stay in on these palatial motels on the rim. I mean, they're $1,000 a night per person, but
Wow.
they're proud of it. Yeah. But you can stay down outside the crater, down the side of the Ngoro uplift there, which for much more modest prices and things. And if you get these tours, they show you where your accommodation can be, and sometimes you might take a short plane flight to see some of the other features of the Serengeti and stuff. But there's a lot of people live down the side of it on the east side of the crater, and that area is okay to house tourists and things like that. But it's just
Mm-hmm.
the actual garden itself that they are trying to keep fairly intact. There are some small groups of tribes that live up on the northern part, up above the rim. There's an uplift that has the Ngoro crater and one, two, three, four, five, about six other craters form the complex in which the middle of it is the Garden of Eden. And so they've allowed some of those who grew up in that area to stay in the northern areas up there near where the river split. But other than that, there's no big development or anything else. That's it. Pristine.
Mm.
On the
Let's
northern
see.
side of it, talking about volcanoes, there's something called the Mountain of God in English, but the locals call it Oldoño Lengai, which means the Mountain of God. And remember that legend about God coming down and, you know, making man and putting him in the garden and then leaving after he puts him out. Okay, at the northern end of the garden, but not in it, but connected to it, is a tall mountain, which is a volcano that's still active. And it's a soda volcano in that it's half the temperature, the magma is half the temperature of any other volcano in the world. And it's the last operating soda volcano on the planet, but it's been doing continuously since, well, Garden of Eden. The the magma that comes out, you can actually sit up on the rim and back a bit, a few feet there. You can camp on a tent if you climb the volcano, and you can watch it bubble up this magma, and you'll see silvery bubbles of magma coming, forming, and pressing out of the orifice there, and they will cool and then break and fall apart. Fragile things. Now, one of
Mm-hmm.
the funny things I found out about this, all this stuff from this volcano washes from the rains down into a lake, which is where the other three of the other rivers from Eden flow through this lake, getting down to, downhill down into Saudi Arabia, whatever. But this lake is called Lake Natron because this soda volcano is what's called a natron volcano, and you don't want to drink that stuff. As I said, it's pretty toxic. But the funny thing about it is I found that 17% of that stuff coming out of there is the same stuff you take in Alka-Seltzer for belly burden.
Oh no.
I think God had a sense of humor and provided a cure for what we were going to go through.
Oh, I think so too.
Yeah.
Wow. I believe
Uh,
God has a sense of humor, most definitely. We were created in His image and we like
yeah.
to laugh, so.
Yeah. 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 Now, let's see if I've forgotten any major points here to share with you on that. Some of the words that they use for describing Havilah, it's famous for its gold and for its onyx and its bdellium. Bdellium is myrrh. It's a gum from a myrrh tree. Uh, just one of those little rabbit holes. I had to go down to figure out what African myrrh was about. Today, you can get it in sub-Saharan Africa, in Angola, and Botswana. It smells really nice, and that's why it gets brittle. You have to grind it up, and melt it, or burn it, or whatever to get the fragrance out of it. But it's good.
Is that the same type of myrrh that was
Yep,
taken to? It is.
yep, yep.
Ah,
Very precious, very precious. There were countries in southern Saharan region, southern Africa as well, that made their living, their whole income was from growing myrrh, and then transporting it by caravan to the various customers up into as far as, I guess, Syria. I mean, they traded all through that area.
I thought at one time too that I had read that myrrh was more precious than gold.
At one time, it was. Yes, yes. It was. It was the king's perfume type thing. It was very expensive. I've seen them in the markets, in the photos I've seen over there, that the markets where the traders have got it in boxes of different size and color of chunks. It's like grading diamonds, It's not quite as precious today, but it was in those days.
I see.
Frankincense is similar. It's another one of the spices that was very valuable. Onyx, the other thing they mentioned there about Havilah, I was tracking down where Havilah would be. I looked for where onyx deposits, big deposits, are found in the world.
Mm-hmm.
The first name that came up was Madagascar, and the next was India. And of course, India and Madagascar connected at that spot. And of course, Tanzania, they were all connected, and that's where the onyx of the world is found today. Sri Lanka, Sri Lanka is on the southern tip of India, very close to Madagascar at the time. Pakistan was the only other place that had onyx in that whole region. So you can see that four of the 5 pointers, or 5 rabbit holes, if you wish, pointed to Tanzania, Madagascar, India, and that connected area there. And that's how I was able to find where Havilah settled. That's why they named the land of Havilah. It was after the descendant of Noah there. And for a long time, they couldn't find Havilah, but this does tell us where he is. I
Never a
found enough.
dull moment with researching anything from the Bible.
If you put your faith in it and say this is true, let's trust it. Let's look for it. Yeah, yeah.
How long did it actually take you to put all these pieces together, Stan?
Probably about 3 or 4 months, as I was finding various things in these rabbit holes you speak of. Holly sits about 10 feet from me here at her desk, and I would say, "Oh, listen to this! Look at this!" And then we'd sit there for a minute and have that hair sticking out moment on the back of your neck. He's, wow, heavy stuff. But
Right.
yeah, the time went past. I mean, you do other things in between rabbit holes, but
Mm-hmm.
and you think about it while you're having your quiet moments. What have I forgotten? What else could I find to prove these points and locations? And so it happens over a period of time.
And you have those moments too that you've got things that you've already looked at that you don't even have to be looking at it, and then you realize the importance of it. I call
Yes.
those the V8 moments.
Oh, that'll work. That'll work. Yeah. I'm just trying to find something here. When I was doing all this, one rabbit hole turned into a whole lecture. Um, that was the Solomon lecture, where I borrowed from having found Havilah, and where where Solomon was able to get his gold,
Hmm.
and I was able to solve some mysteries. It's right in front of us in the Bible, just like you say. If you just look at what it says and take that as true and start to follow it, you'll find the answer to what you're looking for. Um, the Havilah settled next to a son called Ophir, Ophir, and references in Solomon's case reference to the gold of Ophir in Job 22:24 as well. And it says, "Thou shalt lay up gold as dust, and the gold of Ophir as the stones of the brooks." Now, remember I was telling you about Madagascar earlier in the show, about the fine gold dust that they find in the rivers flowing down from the mountains there, and you can just scoop it up.
Yes.
That was as gold as dust, and the gold of Ophir as the stones of the brooks. You see, they're talking about the very thing. And that is Madagascar on the eastern side, at a big cove they've got there. It's called Antongila Bay, Madagascar, and you can see it today in Google Earth. And you can see where all the mountains are, the granite with the gold, and how they flow down into these rivers right in front of you. And you just park your ship there, and off you go. You know, uh, the major gold mine that apparently got most of it from Solomon was this Ophir thing, and in Hebrew, it's like a wedge, the Ophir wedge. And if you look at a map, which I have in the lecture, showing India with Madagascar in between it and the east coast of Africa all scrunched together, it looks just like the wedges they used to split stones with in Israel. You put the wooden wedge in between a crack between two, parts of a stone. Pour water on it, and it swells and it cracks the rock. And Ophir means wedge like that. And if you look at Madagascar, it is a wedge between India and Africa when it was connected. So Solomon must have had access to some old maps and stuff to know that.
Oh, wouldn't you love to get your hands on some of that stuff?
Yeah, I know. Great stuff. Now, remember I told you about Cain going into the Indus Valley, the Hindu, right? So,
Yes.
okay, all right. Now, the other gold mine or place where he traded for gold was called Parvaim, the gold of Parvaim, and you'll find that in Second Chronicles 3:6. Now, they couldn't find Parvaim. We don't know where Parvaim is. Where did he get his gold from? So I looked at how fast the ships of Tyre that he used, King of Tyre, to travel the seas, how fast they traveled, 6 knots, with the winds prevailing and stuff, and was able to calculate how many miles they could go within a year and a half, or less. Then I looked and I said, well, Parvaim, that's nothing in Hebrew. Oh, wait a minute. The end of the word im, I-M, means masculine plural.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, in my circle of places to go, they could have gone to the Indus River Valley in India. Well, let's see if there are any words in India close to Parvaim. And I found, surprise, surprise, when you visited there, from other countries, they would show you their Parva. The Parva is a collection of their holy writings and books. They were everywhere on palm leaves and bound together.
Mm-hmm.
So Solomon called it the Parvaim, the things, the masculine Parvaim, because they were god papers over in India. So that's where
Right.
he got his gold there in the Indus River Valley. Now there was another one that he got. Let me. That's the one that where he traded in the Mediterranean up toward the Straits of Gibraltar, near Morocco, actually. And I think Morocco is where he did do it because there's a clue given in Second Chronicles 9:21. Solomon sent the king's ships went to Tarshish with the servants of Hiram. Every 3 years, once came the ships of Tarshish, bringing gold and silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks. So I looked to see uh, whether they were going to be getting apes and ivory and silver from India. Well, they had elephants there. Didn't see many apes reported there, but they did have silver and gold, and they had some peacocks. Then I looked over to Africa, a little closer to home. The Moroccan coast there, they traded with African traders and tribes from in the interior of Africa, and they had gold, silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks. Okay, fine. That could very well point to Morocco, but where did they get the name Tarshish from? So then I started looking in the rabbit hole concerning Morocco and the history of it, and found that Tarshish is from two words, Tarshisha. Now, do you know what a hookah is?
No.
It's one of those glass-looking things with a rope or a tube attached to it, where a guy smokes his opium and gets high. You've seen them in those movies where they're smoking from some kind of pot that's glass or looking
Right.
thing. Okay, and they have it over fire to melt and make the fumes. Anyway, that's a hookah. And the black tar from that is opium. And they did call it tar shisha. So what's a shisha? A shisha is one of those uh, containers that you heat up to make the smoke from the opium go up into your tube that you're smoking it from. So Morocco was known for its tarshishas, and that's why they called it the gold of Tarshish.
Oh, okay.
Fun stuff. Oh, I saw an article after I'd done the lecture about the president of India, prime minister of India. I guess he's a prime minister. He was saying in the last couple of years, I saw the news article, and it said that he was talking to the Ethiopians, saying that their gene, their bloodline was really, they're going to prove it one day from northern India in the Indus Valley. So I started looking at Emperor Haile Selassie. He had features that were definitely not the normal features of African tribals, but of a more regal, long nose version of the North Indians or the Northwest Indians there near the Indus Valley. And I looked at some models, photo models from Ethiopia. Sure enough, they have those same fine features that you find in northern India. When the lands were together, there must have been some crossing between the Ethiopian coastline and what it touched, India. And in India, they talk about the god Shiva,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I found a little valley that hooked up to the coast of Ethiopia, but in India, where they mention Shiva in that area. So we know that the queen of Sheba might also have been the queen of Sheba, Shiva, because the B and the V in Hebrew is interchangeable. Now, that there are other things that say the Queen of Sheba originally lived in southern Saudi Arabia near Yemen, I think it was, on the coast, and she had a kingdom there. And after she came back from Solomon and was pregnant with his child, Menelik the First, she then moved over to Eritrea, to the coast, northern part of Ethiopia. So if there was communication between her people there and India through that connection to North Africa, then that might explain part of the genetic bloodline sharing and the Queen of Sheba being, the name that they took back to India as Shiva.
It's true. I've noticed that Ethiopia seems to be such a pivotal point in Bible history. It amazes me because there are so many things that when you look up and read about Ethiopia, I mean, they have the only Bible that has the book of Enoch in it. And
Right.
they have such a rich history, and so much can be traced back to them from the Bible days.
Well, the oldest, well, let's see, yeah, two of the oldest known bones of upright human beings, hominids, have been found in the Omo Valley, which is on the western side, western part of Ethiopia. It's about 200 and some odd miles from the Garden of Eden, but um, you know, it seems like a lot of stuff started in that area.
It did. And it's interesting that once you start getting in and doing some of that research, it just seems like there are all these arrows that in my head that I can see that it points towards Ethiopia.
Yeah, isn't it fascinating?
It is. It's where I go off on those rabbit trails and I just get lost in it.
Speaking of that, that red dot on the Hindu, that's called a bindi, a Bindi. I just remember that bindi.
What is the definition for that? Do you know?
Well, from their Sanskrit records, it's originally was called a bindu, but they don't really know where it came from. They use it for various religious and marital statuses now, but its use has changed over the ages. And as I said, they still kind of don't know really where it came from originally.
Hmm. I thought maybe the name itself had a definition.
Well, I don't know. You have the Hindu religion, and the people are called Hindi, and this is a Bindi. Is there a relationship like that? You say, I
I
don't know.
see.
And there's been documentaries on the some of the less reputable channels on the history thing with these UFO documentaries or something where they explore India and the Indus Valley. And I did watch here recently some of the photography and then checked it out on the internet for the guy that discovered it originally.
Hmm.
That Mohenjo-daro, one of those two ancient cities that they've been excavating, they found um, in the middle of the town or the city, and it had its own pyramid and all kinds of stuff, and religious center, and it had flowing water uh, piped or through open channels from water sources into the homes, and they had sewers that were covered by stones, like making a stone channel for the sewer to come out of each home and go out to the dumping ground for the sewers. So it's very, reasonably advanced for that period. And this, in the center of this area, there was a zone where all the pots, made of clay, and the bricks and things were all fused as though they'd been in an atomic blast. They were melted to glass.
Mm?
But that was a small blast because it didn't take out the whole town, but yet it did kill a bunch of people because they found their skeletons all laid out in, flat, without any damage from predators over the centuries. Nobody touched it, and the bones were all intact. But what killed them? They What technology killed them? And I wonder if the Indian, the Vedic writings talking about the gods fighting in the air with metal cities and fire from them falling down and hitting Mohenjo-daro and melting it and stuff, if that weren't true, and this is part of the fallen ones having a disagreement.
It's an interesting thought.
Well, I think we're going to see it happen here one day soon. We'll see the good Lord and understand it all.
I believe that too. We'll get all those answers that we really want, and everything will make sense that didn't make sense.
I understand. I
Yeah.
understand.
God's got a
Yeah.
reason for everything, and I guess some of it we just have to wait to find out.
Yes, if we can't find a rabbit hole with an answer, that's what we'll have to do.
No, that's true. Now, Stan, could you please let everyone know where they could purchase your DVD?
Oh, sure. Just go to Stan Deyo, all run together, Standeyo, and then put a dash or a hyphen after that and spell the word cart, C-A-R-T. So it's standeyo-cart.com. And you can see, read a bit about it there, and also some of the other books and things that Holly and I have put up there.
Lots of great things there, everyone. Check it out. Now, I know that we wanted to touch on the Middle East updates.
Yep,
Is there
yep.
anything else that you wanted to say on the Garden of Eden? Because I don't want to cut you off.
Oh, there probably should be some other things, but I can't remember them all right now. It was,
You'll
I think
remember when we hang up.
oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Oh,
Dear.
yeah, there's a lot going on in the Middle East right now. There always is. And it seems to be escalating at an even more rapid pace than it was last time you and I talked.
Yes. You've got in Saudi Arabia an interesting coup is about to happen in the royal family. The old King Salman is becoming very forgetful and Alzheimer-like. So his normal successor is his cousin, another member of the Saud family. But the old king favors his 30-year-old son, King Salman, Mohammed bin Salman, the prince. And Mohammed bin Salman, the prince, he gave him the job of being Secretary of Defense for Saudi Arabia. And immediately, young Prince Salman went down to Yemen and fought down there and got his tail kicked and came home. And then the oil prices dropped, and young Prince Salman was in charge of the distribution of wealth from the oil income to the people. And the people of Saudi Arabia want for nothing, really. It's just a wonderful system. But anyway, the oil prices dropped, and he couldn't hand out as much money to the people, and so he's now in disfavor. But there's very strong evidence that he's going to head up a coup to take the throne from his father's cousin and bypass the normal succession. Now, the reason this is important is because young Prince Salman ordered a number of Muslims of the group that support Iran to be executed, and they killed their mullah as well. So now Iran and Saudi Arabia are at each other's throats. The I don't know whether they actually go to war, but there's certainly talk of it. So that's a developing issue in the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Prince Salman is his name is Salman, and that's the Assyrian spelling of the name Solomon. But in Hebrew, Solomon is not Solomon; it's Shlomo. And that's the name that was given to King Solomon in the Bible by his mother Bathsheba. And if you'll recall, Bathsheba was the wife of Uriah the Hittite, and the Hittite nation was part of the Assyrian nation before that.
Right.
So she says to David, I'm pretty sure, she says to him, to King David, okay, this is our son. Let's not call him Jedediah, which is what the prophet Nathan wanted to name him. Let's call him Solomon or Shlomo, after, with the SH is after the Shalman, after the first king of Assyria, who had lived and conquered and made the kingdom of Assyria about 250 to 300 years before Solomon was born. But he was well known throughout the Middle East as a great king, and merciful in some areas and pretty gruesome in others. But he was called Shalmaneser the first. And Shalmaneser, when they translated the Assyrian scripts, Shalman is like Solomon would be, and it's Esser is like the god or most elevated Solomon. And there were four other King Solomons after that, King Shalmans, in the Assyrian and Arab culture. And a lot of the tales of the Arabian Nights type stuff and the mystery around King Solomon working with the jinns and stuff has been melded together with the Israeli King Solomon and with the Arab King Solomon. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So anyway, that plays into the politic in the area. The Syria is now where the majority of the Assyrian Empire was headquartered in the time of King Shalmaneser I. They've even found in Aleppo, just outside of the town of Aleppo in Syria, they've just recently found the ruins of a great temple, a religious temple to their god. And the weird thing about it is that temple shares 65 architectural features with King Solomon's temple, the one he built. And remember,
Really?
he built it like 250 to 300 years after this guy, and his mother Bathsheba would have known about it. So maybe he went over and studied that, or had his people go over and study it. And basically, you have a front chamber, a middle chamber, and a chamber for the Holy of Holies, just like in what they describe in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a connection there. You see, these things are all together. And I went down that rabbit hole, backing up a bit, when I was looking for more information in Revelation 13, where it talked about the number of a man being 600 and 300, 306.
Yes.
And it says, literally, here is wisdom. Let him that has understanding count the number of the beast, that's the first beast, the Antichrist, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Now, okay, everyone's been trying to add up names to get 666, but if you look at the Bible and let the Bible translate for you, who's the only man in the entire Bible that has 666 attached to his name? It's King Solomon.
Yes.
That's how much gold he got. And what was he famous for? He had a double portion of wisdom. He was really smart.
That's
Here
right.
is wisdom. So, and it's the number of a man. Now that man's name is Solomon, right? So are we looking for one of the emerging leaders in the Middle East to have a name of Solomon, Salman or Solomon, or be given a title of the wisdom of Solomon? And so in that respect, I started looking at current events over in the Middle East, where Pope Francis has just released a 1.5 minute video which says, let's bring all the faiths together. We all worship the same God. And he shows interviews, or just flashes on the screen, of Muhammad and a Jew and the Pope together, and then Buddhist symbolism together, all the religions together. He's trying to form a world religion. And there is a book about him, been compiled and published now, about the Pope, by Andrea Kirk Asaf. And the title of the book is Pope Francis's Little Book of Wisdom.
Mm.
Now you see, it might not have to be a Solomon, but here is wisdom. Now, there are a number of things, as I say, in current events that are looking like part of biblical prophecy. Certainly the oil that we discussed last time is a portion of it. The break between the Obama administration and Netanyahu, there's no love lost there, does put Israel in a precarious position where it's going to be forced. I've been expecting this for several years now, where it's going to be forced to strike Iran. And now that Obama has given Iran $150 billion to play with, it means that Iran has the freedom to move troops and equipment and to attack Israel. They want Israel wiped off the map. I just find
Yes.
this hard to believe, but that's what's happening.
It's sad.
Yeah, it is. It is, but it's current events. And the problem is, what language do you translate names to? Do you do it in Greek? Do you do it, in Koine Greek, or do you do it in Hebrew or English or German or Russian? And that's been the problem with the schematic summing of 666.
It's going to have to be a universal language. And I
Well,
think whatever it is, it's in our face. And we just have to understand what the Bible's telling us.
if we don't look, we won't see it, though. And that's
That's
the
it.
whole effort we're doing here is we're saying, okay, here are some clues. Let's put them all together and start looking at various people and organizations, because there's a beast organization and ahead of it as well, and see which person or group fit best the clues given to us in the Bible. And then maybe some new understanding will come from that, and we'll understand more. But if we don't look, if we don't put these things down and watch current events, we will not see it.
Where do you feel that the Pope actually fits in to the end time prophecies?
The moment I think his organization certainly fits in, the Vatican, with the power it has over so many nations to advise, and he's got priests in every major nation of the world, in fact hundreds of nations,
Yes.
and they are like his intelligence gathering thing, and he can tell leaders of these countries this or that to make them make decisions the way he wants them to by what he has gathered from his intelligence agents, the priests. And now Pope Francis is the first Jesuit pope. They were
Mm-hmm.
a very kind of militant group before in history, which was sent out like in the Inquisition to get the Protestants and kill them or make them change back to the Mother Church, they would say. So to have that bloodline behind him and to be the real pope now, the white pope instead of the black pope, puts him in a really powerful position. And you see so many world leaders, including Obama, going over to, suck up to him, that there's behind the scenes power there.
Mm-hmm.
He Now he himself may or may not be the head of a global organization set up, but he has already been talking to a scientific group in Italy called the Club of Rome. Now, I talked about them and wrote about them in 1978 when I first published The Cosmic Conspiracy. At that time, and even now, they have devised a logical map using computers of the way to best divide the entire planet up into 10 regions, like the 10 kingdoms in the Revelation.
Yes, I've seen that.
Well, now, when you have Pope Francis pushing for a one world church and cozying up to the Club of Rome about this 10 nation consortium, and certainly Pope Francis would have connections into the European Union and into the United Nations, and you have Obama, who's obviously an oddball and evil, who's about
Yes.
to retire next year. What's he going to do when he retires? Some rumors say get to be the head of the United Nations. If he is, he might be the guy that works with the Vatican operation to rule the world.
That's what I've been saying for about the last 3 years, that if we have an election, I will be amazed. I look for there to be a reason for Obama to be able to stay in office with a martial law. But if he does leave office, I expect him to go to the UN.
Yeah, I agree with you because you don't know whether he's going to just stay or whether he's going to go to this new posting somewhere. There
Mm-hmm.
may be an organization that forms out of the United Nations or out of the Vatican that's a totally new global thing based around this global warming problem that they've created, you see.
Yes,
So there may be something else, an XYZ organization headed up by an Obama. I mean, he would rather attend, which he did, that than go care about, massacre in Paris or problems at home. I mean, he just, no, no, I'm going to go, I'm not going to cancel my visit. I'm going to go to that conference on global warming. I mean,
or
that's
go
got to
play
tell you there's more to
golf.
it. Yeah, well, that too.
Yeah. The one thing that I find extremely interesting now, Stan, is the fact that the things that are happening now, as far as the Catholicism, the papal office, to me, I see such a resemblance back to the Dark Ages, where the Catholic Church had so much power with the kings and the nations of the world, that they actually had more power than the people that were supposedly running the countries. And it seems like we're running in a parallel way to what happened then, what is going on now.
Well, quick history lesson. You do remember that they had that power then, but a France, I think it was Napoleon in 1790 some odd, uh, kicked up and kicked out the church. And after Napoleon, anyway, when you had the revolution, the French Revolution, they went to, you know, atheism in essence, or just no God. It was a man of reason out of Voltaire and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And they, at that time, had militarily gone to the Vatican, stripped it of all the treasures and scrolls and everything, took them back to France. And then after that government, France, a few years passed and it was no longer in power like it was. The Vatican came back, sent its priests over there to get back all the scrolls and books and treasures that they had taken over to Paris.
Right.
Well, there was so much of it that the Vatican was so poor at that time that they couldn't afford, they said, to pay for everything to be brought back. So it told the priests, we'll burn what we're not bringing back and give the rest of the papers to the merchants to use for wrapping fish and chips and stuff. Now that happened. Now what happened was the Vatican had been, in essence, killed by that attack. Over the centuries that it gained all that power, or all the heads of state, you were saying, it was now just without power. And in Italy, its lands had been taken away from it and had been reduced back into just, kind of a loose-knit organization near the Vatican Hill. Well, Mussolini gave them the Vatican Hill back and gave them $100 million or something, or 100 million lira, whatever the Italian money was, to get them kick-started back into being a religious power. And since that time, they've gone like gangbusters, collecting money, making their own bank, loaning money to governments. The Vatican Bank is into everybody's pocket out there.
Oh,
And
yes.
when you look at that, what you're saying is this beast has had its head wounded as though to death, the Vatican Empire, but now it's risen up to everyone's surprise.
That's right. Because they took out the Catholic Church. It was for 2 years that Napoleon and they just shut them down.
Yep, yep.
And they weren't able to do anything. And they made a mockery of the Pope and the Catholic Church. I had never looked at it, though, as be the head that was wounded and made such a comeback, because not only do they have the money that they have right there at the Vatican, but they have so many offshore accounts that
Yeah,
it
and they won't report that to you either, what they've really got there.
no, they don't want anyone to know that.
I mean, their budget for their operations, their normal operations, I think per year is like 330 million. No, 330. Yeah, 330 million, I think it is, um, per year, and they usually fall short of that by about 5 million in offerings and in income. But that's just in the main church, not in the banking and the offshore accounts that you mentioned.
That is so hard to believe because it's such a small. I mean, Vatican City, it's so small. What is it? 800 and some people that live there.
I don't know, but it's a tiny little piece of real estate. But it certainly, you know, and people are saying, okay, well, this beast, the first beast, it sits on 7 hills, and it's also 7 kings, blah blah blah. The Vatican does not sit on 7 hills, as I said earlier. It's off to the northwest, I think it is when you look at the map, of the 7 hills of Rome. I suspect that what's going to happen is that the Vatican organization is going to open up a seat in Jerusalem, and Jerusalem is sited on a group of 7 hills, and the Temple Mount, Mount Zion there, is one of the 7 hills. So if the Vatican goes into Jerusalem and sets up, the Vatican office there, and they have formal relations with the government of Israel, then they and all the other religions that have their religious churches and centers there could easily form a global religious socio-economic order run by the Vatican, and whoever the Vatican appoints is the Antichrist to run it from Jerusalem. And that's
Mm.
just, those 7 hills are there, and it's a better fit than Rome actually is. So, you know, there are other people in Israel and politics I've been looking at since 1989. Nimrod Novik is one of them, and he's still active in politics and been pushing to, he may go back into politics again. He was the gopher boy for Shimon Peres for the first 100 days of office back in the 90s. And he's learned a lot, and he was actually part of the Israeli group that went to the Oslo Peace Accords and drafted the 7-year peace treaty over the Palestinian issue, which fizzled. So he's now part of the directorship of a peace organization in Israel, has been for some time. senior management of it, looking for world peace. And so he's a likely candidate to step back in to this order that the Vatican may set up in Jerusalem, and that may be real soon, because the last year there was a press release showing Shimon Peres, who Nimrod Novak used to work for, as I said, showing Shimon Peres meeting with the Pope, discussing and saying, look, why don't we just make a one world religion for all of them and bring everything together?
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's an Israeli former prime minister saying to the Pope that, with a Pope that's trying to, right now, unify the religions, and it's going to be soon, I'm sure, opening up a Vatican consulate in Jerusalem. The pieces are falling together so quickly that if you don't keep up with the press every day, you're going to get behind.
That's easy to do too,
I know.
to get behind. Now, what do you make of Maitreya, the corporate mogul, I believe from Europe? But Hitler had even predicted Maitreya as being the third Antichrist and the final one. What do you make of him? Do you believe that he's going to have any power?
Well, honestly, I don't know. I've been studying this Maitreya business for probably 40 years. And, if you count in numbers and names, you can get Maitreya to add up to 666 if you spell it a certain way. But I'm not convinced that this Maitreya is anything other than a false Christ that's been set up. As we're told to watch, there would be many false Christs until
Mm-hmm.
the the last one, the Antichrist, would take over. So I'm not too worried about this Maitreya character. It's been banded around so long, and pictures that allegedly might be him, but they aren't sure. And I just think it's a hoax, really. Yeah.
Yeah.
The guy that runs this organization for the world government is going to be someone that is trusted and proven in ruling circles of the planet, not so much by people, but by the rulers. So it's got to be somebody that knows the ropes, which is why you look at princes and kings and former politicians, in the Middle East. They've got to have knowledge of the area and the politics of it, which goes back thousands of years, so that they can be trusted. And some guy named Maitreya that's wandering around in a robe and sandals somewhere that you can't meet or talk to doesn't really cut the bill unless he's doing it in secret to all these world leaders. And I just doubt that would happen and not some of it leak out.
Yeah, and he is so bold. I believe there was a man named Benjamin Cream
Yep.
that worked with him and hailed him as the Antichrist. I don't believe that when it happens that the Antichrist is going to come out and say he is the Antichrist. I
No,
believe
Benjamin
he's,
Cream was supporting him as a good guy, the Messiah.
yeah, and then though I'd heard him, I believe it was on Art Bell, that he said that Maitreya was going to come on and state that he was the Antichrist. This has been many years ago, and I thought
Oh,
that
well, I
makes
forget that.
absolutely no sense at all.
No, why would you do that? No, that doesn't make sense.
Mm-mm. No,
No.
he wants to come in and he's going to do it in a quiet way and make himself look good. And as you say, trusted. And who is going to trust someone that comes in and instantly says, well, I am the Antichrist? Well, that just blows the whole thing right out of the water.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think if we just keep looking at current events and looking at the clues that we need to fit to this guy and to the organization. I mean, the red dragon is Satan in the
Mm-hmm.
Revelation, and the kingdoms are really kingdoms, and the hills are those kingdoms. It tells you. I mean, up to Revelation 19, it helps. Or 17. Sorry, it helps decode the mystery of that. It tells you what all those parts mean. And that 10 kingdoms that'll have, or 10 kings that'll have a short reign with the Antichrist, with the last part of the beast there, the last head,
Mm-hmm.
tells us that regional 10 nations of the world and that Club of Rome map could very well be those 10 kings, because it's a short-lived group that's being formed now.
It's true. Now, there's one that was it says in the Bible that who was and is no more, I believe, but will be again.
Yeah, he's one of the eighth, even is one of the seven. He was, is not, and yet will be,
That's it. Thank you.
coming up out of the, ascending out of the pit. Um, at the time that was written, around 90 A.D. by John, the Roman Empire had fallen, or was in heavy, about to fail. It was going to be a couple of hundred years before it was totally gone. So maybe he was referring to the Roman Empire as uh, was, but is not, but will be again. The reason I say that is around the time that Rome fell over several hundred years, it took a while for it to collapse entirely. But as it fell, when Constantine made Christianity the state religion, what he did was he moved the Roman imperial structure of government into the Catholic Church, where
Mm-hmm.
instead of having a Caesar, you had a Pope. Instead of having regional governors, you had, cardinals, archbishops, and that kind of stuff in the chain of command. And so the Roman order of things, in a religion that worshipped a Messiah, Jesus, and his mother, like Semiramis or Astarte, the mother-son type things that the pagans were using, by hiding those in the structure of the Roman Catholic Church, it allowed for Rome to be preserved even though thought to be dead, and to arise again in the end days through the papacy, turning it into a political structure again. That's another way to look at that.
Yeah, that's good. As you said, we just have to get in and read, and we have to pray, that God gives us the knowledge to understand what we're reading and where to look to get
The
the
thing,
answers.
we're not going to have one person solve it and write the answer, okay, here it is. What we're going to have and do have is a number of us who are seeing the need to do this, to identify the man of sin, finding various portions of the truth, the interpretation and the application to current events, sharing that on the internet and with tapes and videos and lectures with other people that are also looking, picking up what they are doing and adding it to the general knowledge of the Christian body now, so that through all of us we can put together an understanding. The same spirit should guide us all toward the truth.
Amen.
So it won't be just one guy that you've got to look at his interpretation and that's it. It will be our interpretation through study.
Mm-hmm. That's a great way to put it. Well, Stan, it has been absolutely awesome to have you on with me again tonight. Is there anything else that you'd like to share before we do the closing?
No, I think we've covered most of the things that we wanted to this evening. I think that's it.
Yeah, you've got me thinking about future shows with you, so that always
All right.
happens when you're on with me.
Well, that's all right.
Would you like to tell everyone, too, again, before we close, how they can find you in case they didn't have a pen and paper handy?
Right. Well, go to standeyo.com. That's STANDEYO.com. And you'll see in the front page down under some pictures of the books. You click on those. That'll let you read about the books and the DVDs and take you over the shopping cart if you want. But also you can listen to the lectures that I've put onto the website there under what's called what is it called? Listen here, I think. Let me just see what it says. Show images and recent interviews. So recent interviews you can listen to, and show images page you can see the things we've been talking about here tonight on the show. But if you get a chance, Kay, you can put that up on your site. Those links I sent you, that'll take you to the same place.
Almost definitely. I'm going to post those up with the broadcast so people can be looking at them while we're talking.
Right. Excellent. Okay. All right. That'll be good.
And how would you like to do the closing prayer, please, Stan?
All righty. Folks, let's part tonight, word of prayer. And Lord, Heavenly Father, through Yeshua, we ask you to bless our efforts tonight to share uh, our understanding of prophecy that you've given to your prophets for our benefit. Give us peace of mind, provide for our needs of the body, the church. Open our minds to the coding that you put in the books of Daniel and the Revelation of John and various other books of the Old Testament, to let us know how to find the Antichrist, the man of sin, and to identify him, as Scripture says will happen before you come for your bride, the church. In the meantime, bless us all with the needs of the body and the spirit. Protect all of the Christians around the world, especially those that are being threatened to be killed by Muslims and terrorists. Shield them and get them to safety if it's within your will. and bless Kay and her ministry, and Holly and my ministry together. And I think that's all we need to ask of you tonight, Heavenly Father. And thank you very much. Amen.
In Jesus' holy name, amen. Well, thank you again, Stan. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. That's going to do it for this week. I pray you all have a blessed week. Good night, everyone.
Good night.